Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
Meow, I'm Hoople's cat. The one experiment most people have heard of is the 1971 Stanford Prison Experiment. It proved that human beings are easily turned into monsters under the right conditions. Or did it? Young white males, as part of the 1960s-70s hippie culture, rapidly became power-crazed fiends wielding batons and torturing prisoners. 48 hours before, they were exactly the same type of people as the prisoners. How could that happen? From this relaxed counterculture lifestyle to full-on baton-waving, power-crazed people in 48 hours? From fighting and occasionally being shot to protest police and military violence and racism into passively controlled and no longer individualized within 72 hours? The science of psychology did not seriously question this until 2019. Most people didn't doubt the findings. This is shocking. So come on a journey with me to have a good hard look at the Stanford Prison Experiment.
So the Stanford Prison Study very simply is an attempt to see what happens when you put really good people in a bad place. We put an ad in the city newspaper, wanted students for study of prison life, lasting up to 2 weeks. We're going to pay you $15 a day. This is back in 1971. It's pretty good money. And we picked 75 volunteers, gave them a battery of psychological tests, and we picked 24 who on all dimensions were normal and healthy to begin with. And then we did what is critical for all research. We randomly assigned half of them to the role of playing guards or the role of playing prisoners. And then what we did is we told the guards come down a day early, and we had them pick their own uniform. We had them help set up the prison so they'd feel like it was their prison and the prisoners were coming into their place.
This is Philip Zimbardo, who was the chief researcher. The 24 hours were used to instruct the guards on what to say and what their reaction should be. It was very much scripted to be overtly hostile and cruel to the prisoners right from the beginning. So this makes all results invalid. Not really surprising to think only 22 hours made normal young men into soulless guards or empty zombie prisoners. What is surprising is that the results never were questioned for over 48 years. Everyone involved made money from books, interviews and films.
The prisoners, we simply said, wait at home or in the dormitories. Well, what we didn't tell them, which is a little bit of the deception of omission.
A little bit? No huge flagrant ethics violations at the beginning, during and the end of this research study. It is arguable whether it caused harm or not, as we shall see later. If it was scripted, then likely there is no harm. But the chief researcher led his own research as the prison governor. He later claimed he got caught up in it like everyone else, thus causing more proof that his thesis was valid. Even he lost his individuality. The prisoners were told that they'd experience arrest and detention. They were not told they'd be abused, forced to fight each other, or subject to not being able to quit the study. Not being able to quit in a human research study is an absolute huge violation of ethics. Zimbardo had told the guards that they were his research assistants, but not that they were in the study as participants. Another huge ethics violation. He told them what to say and how to react. He told them it would end early, and this invalidates it all as research. Okay, this sounds bad, eh? Makes the results even more dramatic. So prisoner 8612 is supposed to have had a mental collapse. He was then denied healthcare and continued in the study. Wow. Except it was scripted. Prisoner 8612 wanted to study for an exam whilst in jail, but the guards denied him access to his textbooks. He was interviewed by Zimbardo and then returned to his cell. It is likely he acted out as directed to see how it would impact the others. But let us return to Zimbardo's take on all of this.
Is that they were arrested by the city police.
Right there, they took me out the door, they put my hands against the car. It was a real cop car, it was a real policeman. They took me to the police station, the basement of the police station.
I had told the policeman to put a blindfold on the prisoners, but since they had never been arrested, they didn't know that doesn't happen. The reason for the blindfold is then my assistants would come, put him in our car, bring him down to our prison, and they'd be in our prison now, blindfolded. The guards would strip them naked, delouse them, pretending that they were lice. It's kind of a degradation ritual. And after the first day, I was about to end it because nothing was happening.
Yeah, sadly nothing happened during the first 24 hours. Zimbardo expected extremely fast results, I guess. Put the uniform on and immediately become a different person. Using the blindfold on the prisoners was absolutely abuse, and it's interesting he felt that he had to do that to make the study convincing. Try that now in a research experiment and see how fast you get sued.
But the next day, on the morning of the next day, the prisoners rebelled. And what the guards did, they came to me and said, the prisoners are rebelling, what are we going to do? I said, it's your prison. Whatever you want, I will do it, but you got to tell me. And they said, we have to treat force with force. So they broke down the doors. Stripped the prisoners naked, dragged them out. Some of them, they tied up their feet.
So physical restraints were fine on day 2? From nothing's happening at all on day 1 to having to use physical restraints on day 2. If you think about it, that's a bit suspicious. Bit fast, eh? But the truth is, the experiment was set up to get the results that they wanted to get because they already wrote out what results they were going to get before the study even started. Now these guards know they're in a study. Why would they risk arrest? Why would they get so violent and aggressive so fast?
They put him in solitary confinement, which was a tiny little hole in a closet, about this big, dark, and they said at this point, everything but breathing air is a privilege. Food is a privilege, clothes are a privilege, having a bed is a privilege. And so the guards began to say, here are the new rules. And the new rules are, you are dangerous and we are going to treat you as such. And then it began to escalate. Each day, the level of abuse, aggression, violence against prisoners got more and more extreme. And so the guards changed to become more dominant. And you see, it's all about power. It's the whole institution that empowers the guards, who are the representative of this institution called prison, to do whatever is necessary to prevent prisoners from escaping, maintain law and order.
Keep going. Once I was blind, but now I see. I was...
The way direction it took is having them engage in ever more humiliating tasks, cleaning toilet bowls out with their bare hands, taking their blankets and putting them in dirt and with nettles, and the prisoners had to spend hours taking the nettles out if they wanted to, sleep. And it's essentially saying, we have the power to create a totally arbitrary, mindless environment, and that's the environment you have to live in. So some of the prisoners are now crushed, and in 36 hours the first kid has an emotional breakdown, meaning crying, screaming, irrational thinking.
I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. No! God damn it!
And we have to release him.
Okay, did they do any follow-up? Is there any suggestion of any real concern that he really broke down? What did the guards and the other prisoners think and do when he had his breakdown? Prisoner 8612, Corpy, became a prison psychologist. In other words, he got an advanced degree in psychology. And here he is in a psychology experiment. Not a red flag as such, but it makes you wonder.
In 5 days, we had to release 5 of the prisoners because the situation was so overwhelming. What about the kids who didn't break down? They became zombies. Zombies in the sense that they became almost all mindlessly obedient. Whatever the guards would say, they did. Do this, they did. Do 10 push-ups, do 20 push-ups. Step on him while he's doing a push-up. Tell him he's a bastard.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad...
So within 48 to 72 hours, we are to believe that the individual prisoners became so beaten down by their regime and their circumstances that they became de-individualized zombies. Same time frame for the guards. But none of the guards and none of the prisoners in any meaningful way refused to take part in the experiment once they realized they didn't like it. None of the prisoners attacked physically the guards. None of the guards refused to do what they were told to do by the prison governor, who happened to be the chief researcher. For me, after 72 hours, they would not have lost their personhood. This is a script. That's my opinion.
Horrifying to see the kids break down. It was even more horrifying to see these other kids just become mindlessly obedient.
Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess. Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess.
Again, we have to keep remembering, these are kids who start out being rebels against society, every one of them, and now they are just pawns. They are the puppets that the guards are manipulating. In fact, one of the guards said it was like being a puppeteer.
Are the guards spontaneously doing this, or have they been scripted and instructed to do so by the chief researcher, the prison governor, Zimbardo? What do you think? The Stanford Prison Experiment needs removing from the science of psychology, as it is not just unethical, but it was also deeply flawed.
The guards tested their control over the prisoners by making them write a letter home.
No need to visit, it's 7th heaven. Yours truly. Yours truly. Your loving son. Your loving son. And put the name there that your mother gave you.
The results were surprising because I did not expect the transformation of good kids into pathological prisoners or abusing guards to occur so quickly and so extremely. That is, we had assumed from all other research, that there would be verbal abuse, they would make fun of them, there would be teasing, there would be bullying, but not this kind of, I would call it creative evil. That is, thinking about ways to demean, degrade, dehumanize other human beings. And the critical thing there in that transformation is becoming the role, or the role becoming you, and suspending your usual morality, your usual way of thinking.
In 5 days? Are humans this weak? Do we so easily lose our individuality and commit evil? That the Stanford Prison Experiment is so well known and believed to be true is outrageous when you look at the fortitude, resilience and bravery of prisoners of war throughout history. From this timeline, specifically look at American prisoners of war in early 1971 in Vietnam. They did not break or lose identity within a week of capture despite much more worse and brutal treatment. Their story is what should have informed psychology, not the flawed Stanford Prison Experiment. Of note, I will assume anything a draft dodger says about an American hero who suffered 5.5 years in captivity by the Viet Cong as nonsense.
He hit me. He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you agree with that?
He's a war hero because he was captured, okay? You can have, and I believe perhaps he's a war hero, but right now he said some very bad things about a lot of people.
We all act roles. Sometimes it's the only way to survive. Sometimes it is convenient. Acting tough while being a coward seems more convincing than it should be. Being a hero is refusing preferential treatment from the Viet Cong because your dad happened to be an admiral, and staying to be tortured for 5.5 years when he only had to stay for a few weeks. In 2024, no one seems to know what a hero or coward actually is anymore. I believe the Stanford Prison Experiment has helped this blurring of reality.
You really become that person once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick, and you act the part.
Zimbardo became very famous from this experiment, and he went on to do other experiments, which to me, when I look at them, and I haven't studied them in any detail, seem a little bit suspect. And who funded it and why? This one's really going to surprise you.
On the first day, I said, this is not going to work. I mean, the guards felt awkward giving orders, and they'd say, okay, line up, repeat your numbers, and the prisoners would start giggling.
Hey, I don't want anybody laughing. 3, 2, 1.
And then a very interesting thing happened. Dave Eshelman, who the prisoners named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
Why? Zimbardo told him to act this way. This invalid and unethical research for decades has been held up as a wonderful piece of research in psychology. Zimbardo's research history should have warned people.
I want you to see in the future that you do work when you're told. Say it again. Say bless you, correction officer.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
Somebody would be Zimbardo, but, quote, believing the act, end quote, here is the key phrase. Demanding the responses is not a great way to find valid responses in science. As I mentioned in the first video, this entire experiment was both unethical and invalid, but did the prisoners also not act?
We did have to do things like push-ups, we would have to sing things. At the beginning, we protested some of the actions, we did things to irritate the guards.
Why? Who told them to irritate the guards? Why would you irritate the guards? Would you irritate the guards on day 2?
If I gotta be in here, I'm not gonna put up with any of your shit.
So the guards' authority was challenged right off the bat. And the guards had to decide how they were going to handle that, and they had to decide it without our input. I mean, again, this was not a Milgram study in which we were standing over them telling them what to do.
But yet they spent a full 24 hours before the prisoners arrived educating the guards. They briefed the guards, they guided the guards, they let the guards set up the experimental conditions. The guards honestly felt that they were researchers, not subjects. This is a key thing. The chief researcher Zimbardo was there throughout the experiment, but he decided he would be the prison governor. Prison governor is firmly on the side of the guards. The prison governor is not a neutral figure. The chief researcher should be very neutral in an experiment.
And they began to see the prisoners' behavior as a kind of an affront to their authority, and they began to push back.
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this, The professor is the authority here. You know, he's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. They took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners.
Okay, how so dangerous? This is a paid experiment. In reality, America outside of this experiment in 1971 was full of absolute terrible conflicts. The guards have batons and the prisoners are locked up. This supposed rebellion the first night fits the script, as we shall see.
So what Zimbardo's research demonstrates so dramatically is that situations can affect us more than we think, and can often outweigh individual characteristics. So if we're going to use psychology to try to reduce the possibility for evil, maybe we need to focus more on systems and less on individuals. But should the research ever have been done? After all, the participants suffered real harm.
No, but there was no harm if everyone's actually acting. The results were written in advance for this study. This study wasn't science, nor was it ethical if we are to believe the researcher and the participants' stories. What does Zimbardo think about this 3 decades later?
In hindsight, again, I have mixed feelings about the study. Should it have been done? Well, not if it means suffering of anybody. Would I like my son to have been in that study? No. On the other hand, does it tell us something vital about human nature that has enduring value? There I have to say yes. It's been used in lots of prisons. It's a training device to get people to be sensitized to how easy it is to abuse power. So in that sense, it has widespread enduring value. Therefore, I'm saying, well, I'm glad I did it.
Hold on a minute, you could use this as a justification for the scientific experiments Germany did on people in prison camps in the 1940s. It's not ethical, it's not a justification. But it also made him very famous. It also made some of the participants famous. Paid interviews, books, and generalized fame alter how we think about our own history. Certainly the years leading up to the 2016 film on this experiment would have been strong motivation to continue sticking to the storyline.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior. I was surprised, I was dismayed to find out that I could really be that I could act.
Act. Over and over the participants state act. It explains how they went from equals to polar opposites in 48 to 72 hours.
In a manner so absolutely unaccustomed to anything I would even really dream of doing. And while I was doing it, I didn't feel any regret. I didn't feel any guilt. It was only afterwards when I began to reflect on what I had done that this behavior began to dawn on me, and I realized that this was a part of me I hadn't really noticed before.
Zimbardo wanted the experiment to show that de-individualization is rapid and easily obtained. This explains why his guards have no individuality or ethics other than the fake John Wayne cowboy figure. It also explains the lack of individuality or independence from all of the remaining prisoners within 72 hours. Okay, so was there actually anything worth saving from the Stanford Prison Experiment? The American Psychological Association ethics guidelines sprang from the Stanford Prison Experiment and other awful human experiments. So all psychological experiments, all human experiments in whatever field now have to not harm the people being investigated. For example, the Tuskegee syphilis study looked at black males who had and didn't have syphilis. The infected were not treated for syphilis when a cure was found in 1936. The doctors and researchers let them be untreated until 1972 to see what would happen. The racism and appalling treatment of human beings in a science experiment by everybody associated with that, and there was a lot of people associated with it, show that ethical guidelines need to be written down and enforced. However, one of the specific benefits of the Stanford Prison Experiment was to show that young offenders were very much at risk from abuse if they were in prison. From this moment on, the move to remove young offenders from adult jails happened. It also showed people should never ever volunteer for psychology experiments. Though films should have already led us to this conclusion. In the end, Zimbardo got what he wanted from the 6 days of this experiment. He proved that people in groups almost always will lose their individuality as soon as they put on uniforms and play roles, as long as the roles are very bipolar opposite. This could happen to you, this could happen to me. In 48 to 72 hours we can go from being nice people to being literally concentration camp guards. Even worse, within 72 hours we become mindless zombie prisoners in that situation. I find that unlikely. For me, this experiment wasn't about de-individualization. It was about finding methodologies to have prison guards lose their individuality and treat prisoners as non-human. Why on earth would anybody want to do an experiment to have prison guards treat prisoners as subhuman? Why would you want prison guards that have no ethics and don't show any kindness to the prisoners? Who would want that? Well, the United States Navy's Office of Naval Research is who would want that. They funded the Stanford Prison Experiment, but they have now erased all traces of that experiment from their public website. They've removed all traces that they hired Zimbardo and paid him to do the Stanford Prison Experiment, despite it being one of the most famous psychological experiments of all time. Now, in 2024, oddly enough, the United States Navy continues to run one of the world's most notorious prisons, where the detained are not encouraged to be individuals or seen by their guards as individuals. Coincidence? I'll let you decide. Well, I hope you enjoyed this set of 2 videos. Just remember, the Stanford Prison Experiment is junk science. It has no validity at all in the real world. Whatever conclusions you want to draw from it, the conclusion that the prison experiment worked is not one. Why would it be so heavily embraced by pretty much everybody in psychology and the media? Well, the 1960s-1970 counterculture was so strong that York University in Toronto, when it built a new building, built it so tanks could go up into the building in case the students occupied the building. Counterculture was aggressive and real. The demonstrations in 2024 are nowhere near as extremely violent as they were in the 1960s and 1970s. If you're in the police or you're in the government, or even if you're a psychologist, if you're in the normal range of people in America, isn't it comforting to know that all of these lawless hippies within 48 to 72 hours in the right circumstances can be broken and become normal, obeying citizens? However, when the hippies grew up and became old people, most of them did become mindless consuming zombies.
Talk about class, and why don't we talk about class? If I mentioned to you that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, that's certainly working class. How come we don't talk about class in America?
The uber wealthy have a lot of political power, and if we started talking about class more often, probably open up more people's eyes to the issues that might threaten their wealth.
Good. More discussion. Why don't we talk about it more? Yeah.
Because then we might unionize.
Well, that's a good point. All right. I think your point is well taken. If we start talking about class, then what we learn is that you have some people who have enormous wealth and power, and you have other people who are struggling. And then people are going to say, well, what can we do to improve that situation, and how do we do it together? That's what a union is. A union basically is saying that I can't do it myself. I need to work with other people to have a contract with my employer. It gives me better wages and working conditions and other benefits. So I think that point is well taken.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please share it and give me a recommend. Give me a thumbs up even. Thank you for watching again. I appreciate it. Toodles. This has been a Well Prepared Terrier 2024 production. Oh, and it's okay to be skeptical, but don't delude yourself. Don't make the world fit your version of reality. Be open. See what happens. Oh, if you see a human being treated unethically in your place of work, speak up.